What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Draft Business as Usual podcast. I am your host, Daniel Fowler, creator of DraftySports.com. And today I'm going to be talking about one of the most complicated things about the auction draft room, and that is bid validation. I grossly underestimated bid validation when I created Drafty. Much like I underestimated most aspects of the auction draft room, and that's because there's so many things going on all at once. But the bid validation is so incredibly sensitive, A, important, B, and fast paced. It happens constantly, every single bid. So I want to talk you through it. And before I do, I got to give my shout outs usually, same spiel as usual. Subscribe on YouTube. You're watching this on YouTube, probably. Make sure you subscribe so you get notified about future podcast episodes or tutorials that I launch from time to time. Follow us on Twitter at Drafty Sport, on Facebook at Drafty Sports, plural. Same thing for Instagram, Drafty Sports. But if you search Drafty Sports on any of those social platforms, you will find us. And yeah, I also want to, let's see, I was going to answer a question. I don't remember what it was, though. I wasn't going to answer a question. But I just wanted to point out, I don't script these podcasts, obviously, as you can tell by my rambling and getting lost and repeating myself 7 times. So if you ever want to know more about a subject, if I gloss over something like it's absolutely nothing, but you're like, wait a minute, I want to know more about that. Or if you think that I've said something that maybe is bad or good, or I don't know, if you just want to talk about anything in the future, let me know. I don't know why I picked this up. It was sitting right there. There's nothing in it. It's empty. So I don't know. But yeah, totally live, totally unscripted. It's a lot of fun. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them on a future episode and dive into whatever topics that you're most interested in. So thank you. Also, if you like the content that I put out or that Drafty puts out, I have a couple of other websites as well. One that is for community theaters. It's a really cool website. It helps them operate more efficiently. It's called Cast 98. And one that I have for big churches, like mega churches, that need some help working more efficiently with their groups and connecting the people in their church, because they're so big, into smaller groups. Those are the types of projects that I work on. My specialty is user experience and designing great user experiences that are simple, making complex things simple. And so if you're interested in any of my work, you can visit my website at fowlertown.com. You can support me on Patreon at Daniel Fowler. And yeah, so if you don't use Drafty, but you want to support what Drafty does, what the mission of Drafty is, privacy first, really simple, trying to provide great draft rooms when the only options out there besides us are ESPN and Yahoo and CBS, and people have plenty of negative things to say about those. So yeah, just try hitting us up on Patreon or Venmo or any of the things. Just search. So anyway, that's enough rambling. I want to get into what we're talking about today. And I don't have a lot of visuals to show you because things happen so quickly. So it's kind of crazy how fast bidding happens. And just to give you a taste of it, let me see if I can share my screen real quick. And yeah, so I'm in a draft here. Well, you can't see it because I didn't add any AI to this draft. But this is a look at the Drafty draft room. If you've drafted with us before, you kind of know how this works. The place bid button places a +1 bid from whatever the current bid is. So right now the bid is $1. I would be able to place a $2 bid if I was not currently the high bidder. Also, you can set a target bid over here on the right and toggle on the auto bid, which is going to automatically place a bid. As long as you are not the high bidder, it's going to automatically bid for you. And it's super fun. So when this is all happening, there's a lot that's going on in the background that's completely invisible. And that's what I want to talk to you about. When you have 12 people in a draft room and everybody's trying to place a bid all at the same time, or, to our human brains, it's all at the same time. But to a computer, it's all very sequential. And so I just want to show you what goes into this. It's really quite amazing. I'm going to go ahead and pause this draft, and I'm going to flip over. We're going to take a look at some code. Now, I'm not going to teach you how to code, so don't be scared. Let me zoom in a lot. I'm not going to teach you how to code, but I do want to show you. I'm just going to walk through some of the code here and show you just what all is happening in these instances when bids are happening. Because they happen, several bids can happen within 1 second. And it's pretty amazing all the math that has to go into it. So within the code that powers the draft room, I have what's called a function, and a function is just like it's a container. You can think of it like a little one of those little plastic Easter eggs. It is the shell. It is the Easter egg. A function is the Easter egg, and inside of the Easter egg is all the mechanical stuff, all the scripts that do stuff. And so, yeah, it's pretty fun. It's like a confetti-filled Easter egg. And this one is called check bid eligibility, and that's because every time a team, let me flip back over to the draft room, every time that a team places a bid, we have to validate that bid. We've got to make sure that it's that the bid is eligible. So when you're just looking at the team summary, you see I've got 14 players left to draft. I've got 14 roster spots available. I've got $199 in my budget. And this draft room has a $1 minimum bid. So that's calculated as $186 that I could spend max on one player, because doing so would leave me $13, and that's how much I would need to fill the remaining 13 spots if I were to bid $186 on the next guy. So all those calculations have to take place, and I'm going to show those to you in just a minute. And I lost my train of thought. What was I about to say about this? I don't know. Maybe it'll come back to me. So let's go back and dive into the code. So what we're doing first is we're setting an isPaused variable to false. And what this is going to do is assume that the draft is not paused, because the only time you should be able to place a bid is when the draft is not paused. And I just remembered what I was about to say a minute ago, and that is, shoot, I lost it again. Yeah, we're doing this live. Love it. So we just assume that the draft is not paused because you shouldn't be able, there it is again. I knew every time I start to talk, it comes back to me. What if? That is the question that gets asked 100 times, pretty much every single, well, not 100 times, about 12 or 15 times every single bid. Within the draft itself, there's probably close to 1,000 what if scenarios that are playing out at any given time during a draft. And so constantly, we have to ask ourselves questions like, what if a team tries to place a bid, but they're out of players? Like they don't have any roster spots available. What if someone tries to place a bid and they don't have enough budget? What if someone tries to place a bid, but they are already the high bidder? Should you allow that? What if someone somehow ends up with a negative budget? How did that happen, and how should we handle that? So in building a draft room, I thought it would just be easy. Place a bid, and then other people place a bid. And as long as you can get the order right and make sure that whoever placed the most recent bid gets the top bid, I thought it was easy peasy. But then I got in there, and I built the first part, and then it was like, well, what if that? Well, yeah, and what if that? And so it ends up being this huge pyramid of what if scenarios where you just have to answer all these questions, because if you can think about what would happen if you're in a draft and you are the high bidder, you know, and there's 5 seconds left on the clock, and a guy comes in, he's got $100 in his budget, and he bids $105. You're going to be pretty mad, right? Because he shouldn't be able to outbid you, and you've got a $100 bid already, maybe, I don't know, and he puts in $105, and you're going to be infuriated because he shouldn't be able to do that. So what if someone tries to place a bid and they don't have enough money to do it? We have to deny that. So those are the kinds of what if scenarios that we're going to be taking a look at. So okay, first of all, you should not be able to place a bid if the draft is paused. So this entire block of code right here is just checking As soon as someone tries to place a bid, it checks to see what the current status is of the draft. Is the draft moving or is it paused? If it's paused, we're going to cause it to fail. But this here is checking to see if the draft is not paused. And if it's not paused, we set, no, sorry, I got that back. We assume that the draft is active. But if this stuff is true, we change that variable to be true because the draft is paused. So then, if we move down a little bit, everything here is only going to happen if the draft is not paused. That's what this little piece of code means. If this is not, if is paused is false. If the variable is paused is false, meaning that the draft is not paused, do all this other stuff. And so right away, if I collapse this, nothing else happens. And so if the draft is paused, we throw an error that shows the draft is currently paused, try to be patient, and then nothing else happens. Easy peasy. So that's the first what if. What if the draft is paused and somehow someone gets a bid off? The bid won't go off. That's what that means. So next, we because the draft is ongoing, we want to get the current bid conditions and compare the attempted bid with what is currently happening in the auction. So that's me, that's not my draft room. So in this draft, if I restart this, the current bid conditions are that the team Drafty Commish is the high bidder. There is $1. The current bid is $1, and the time left is 20 seconds, 18 seconds, 17 seconds, 16 seconds. So we have to make sure that my attempted bid falls within the parameters of those current bid conditions. So we want to make sure the clock has to be greater than 0. Like there has to be time left on the clock. Also, my bid has to be more than the current bid. Because again, that wouldn't make sense. If you've placed a $10 bid, how is someone else going to suddenly be winning the bid with only an $8 bid, winning the auction with only an $8 bid? That wouldn't make sense, and that would be infuriating if it worked like that, if you could just place a bid willy-nilly. So we have to validate against these things. And then also, lastly, Drafty Commish, that's my team. So how do we handle if someone tries to place a bid, but they're already the high bidder? That's an interesting question that I had to come across, and ultimately, I got a message from a couple of commissioners this past draft season who felt like they should be able to bid up on their own. Because one of the things that Drafty does is that we don't allow manual bids, and I might talk about that later. I'm not really sure. Unscripted. And so some people feel like they should be able to bid up on their own. But I'm of the persuasion, and part of the purpose of the way that the Drafty room is built is to protect players from overbidding, like bidding more than you have to. With a manual bid, you can place a $40 bid, but if no one else was going to bid above $25, you just overspent by $15. You could have placed a $26 bid and gotten the same result. So that's kind of how Drafty is crafted to protect you from overbidding. So it's protecting you against yourself. And so ultimately, I decided that if you are the current high bidder, it's just going to be off limits. You're not going to be able to bid. You're not going to be able to outbid yourself because that introduces a whole new collection of parameters that we would have to account for, what if scenarios that we would have to account for. So we just draw the line there. You cannot outbid yourself. If you are the high bidder, you got to wait for someone else to place a bid. So what we do next in the code is we grab that snapshot, all those conditions, and that's what we're doing. Well, actually, what we're doing here is calculating my bid attempt. So this is saying, what's my team name? Well, how many roster spots do I have left? What's my remaining budget? And what is my max bid? And then this transaction is what it's called. It's like a handshake. It's an agreement. We are coming into agreement with the server. We are grabbing the current bid conditions or the current bidding conditions from the server. So what we're doing is we set the bid amount to 0 by default. That's going to change here in just a sec. But we want to set the bid amount to 0 and bid success to false. Because what we want to do is go through all of our what if scenarios. And if these are all true, we're going to flip success to true. But unless all the criteria is met, we want the bid to fail. So by default, we want the bid to fail, and we want the current bid to have to kind of fight. If you want to think about it as like a battlefield, we want the current bid to have to fight their way to the king of the hill, to become king of the hill. So they have to fight the current bid conditions, which we're constantly comparing it against before it kind of takes over as the high bid. So we have some what if scenarios that happen here. I'll just walk you through them. This is saying we have a custom option available in draft rooms to force a bid. And so if someone is trying to force a bid, I'll show this to you in the draft room. They would have an extra button beside the auto bid or beside the target bid. So they would enter a $42 bid, and they would have another button over here called force bid, and they'd be able to click on that and it would bid $42. So it's kind of that traditional manual bid button. So if someone's trying to force a bid, we want to change the bid amount to be the amount that they entered in that target bid box. Excuse me. And so when they enter $42 here, that becomes the bid amount that we want to send into battle against the current bid conditions, if you want to think about it like that. There's another what if match bid is enabled. Again, this is another custom option available in custom draft rooms, where the whoever nominated, the way it's coded right now for this custom draft room that we built it for, if the person that nominated the current player wants to match the high bid, they're allowed to do that. So we check on that. If they used the custom match bid button, which only shows up for that person, then we change the bid amount to the current bid amount. So again, that's not going to increment the bid. That is going to keep the bid the way it is, but they're going to take over as the high bidder. So it's almost like saying you win draws. That's exactly what that is saying, actually. So whoever nominated the player gets dibs for whatever the current high bid is. So it's a cute little thing that we have to account for. So all this entire block of code here is just setting, trying to figure out what the current bid attempt, what the bid amount is in the current attempt. So this next one is saying if there is no current bid and there's no current bidder, then we can set the bid amount to the minimum bid, or else set it to 1 if there's no minimum bid that's been set. So again, in an advanced draft or a custom draft, you're able to set what you want the minimum bid to be in your draft, and that's for every auction, every player that comes up. And so if that minimum bid is set and there's not currently a high bidder, or there's no, if there's not a high bidder, we set the bid amount to be the minimum bid. So that's the starting bid, it's the opening bid at any time. And then last but not least, and this is the most common bid, if none of that is true, so if it's not a forced bid, if it's not a match bid, and if there is a bidder already, then we want the bid amount to be the current bid plus 1. And so that's how Drafty operates. That's how we protect people against themselves from overbidding, by putting in these bid amount checkers to make sure that the default at the end of the day is going to be just a plus 1 bid over what's currently there. So then we move into the real meat of the bid validation. But first, a word from our sponsor. Just kidding. We don't have any sponsors. I just had to be silly for a sec. I'm a theater person, so it happens like that sometimes. But if you'd like to be a sponsor, I'm happy to accept sponsors, but we're brand new, so I don't expect that. So, okay, moving into the bid validation. We want to check first and make sure that they have the roster capacity to take someone on to their roster. So essentially, the first thing we check is to make sure that they have a spot available for the person they're bidding on. If they don't, we just cancel the bid right away. We give them an error message that says your roster is full. If their roster is not full, we move on to the next what if. So this is saying what if that, and then if not that, what if this? What if the bid amount is greater than the max bid, which we defined up here in their team calculations, the bid attempt. So we calculate what their max bid is. What if the bid amount is somehow greater than their max bid? Again, they shouldn't be able to do that. because of the parameters that are set in the bidding mechanisms. But if something happens and they somehow submit a bid that is higher than what their max bid allows, then we just don't let that happen. We give them another error, says you can't afford this current bid. And then we move on and we check what if the bid amount is somehow less than the minimum bid. Again, this should never happen, but what if it does? Like, what if it does because some glitch happened somewhere? We just have to, we want to catch it and we want to fix it. So we say the bidding starts at whatever the minimum bid amount is. And we display that to them in an error and we cancel their bid. We also have sound effects that play. That's what these play sounds is. It's just playing a little sound every time your bid fails for some reason, which is really helpful. And then we say, okay, so that's fine, that's fine, that's fine. What if this is not a forced bid and the bidder ID equals the current team that's attempting this bid? So what if this team ID equals the current high bidder ID? Well, then we say, don't worry, you are getting a little overzealous there, buddy, but you don't have to place a bid because you're already the high bidder. So that's where we say, chillax, you're still the high bidder. And we show that error to them. But although that's not really an error, it's shown in green because it is a good thing. We also, because that is true, bid success is now set to equal true because the bid here is successful, but it just doesn't, it won't overwrite anything. So we show them the error, but we don't really do anything else with that. Yeah, so moving on. Last but not least, if the bid passes all of the above questions, is this bid, well, if it has passed all of those eligibility things above, the bid is valid. It is determined to be valid and it's going to go through. But we check one last thing just to make sure that this is a human, because we only show errors if this is a human, and the only time it's not a human is if this is the AI bidding. So this is in mock drafts only, where you can add an AI to bid against. They're not very smart, and they can't nominate players, so it's not, it's a really dumb AI. But we do want to make sure that this is a human, so that we can show them the success notification indicating that they are now the high bidder. And so that's really helpful. And we give them a little coin sound to let them know that good job, you did it. And so then we just have to set our new bidding parameters, or our new current bid parameters to equal the bid attempt. So we set success as true. We set the name as the current team name, the team that it's attempting this bid. We set the bidder ID to the current team ID, and then we set the bid amount to the bid amount that we established back up at the top. Also, we then check to make sure that if the timer is less than 10 seconds, we reset the timer to equal 10 seconds. And so, you see that all the time. It would be awful if the timer just went down to 0 and that was the end of it, because everybody tries to make these last minute bids. And if you read the drafty tips and tutorials in the draft room, I expressly advise against that, because you're doing nothing but risking losing the auction when you try to wait till the last second to place a bid, because we have this mechanism in place that's going to reset the timer to 10 seconds. So if your bid happens to go through, people are going to have another 10 seconds to outbid you. You're not going to get around it because we have not submitted this bid to the server yet. So there's no way around it. So stop being silly and just place the bid that you want to place. And if you don't want to sit there and place bids, that's why we have the target bid, and you can turn on auto bid and let it bid for you. So it's nothing but a lose situation for you. And no one is going to have sympathy for you if you lose an auction because you tried to bid at the last second and you had a little bit of lag and you're like, oh, come on. They totally said there was 1 second or maybe 2 seconds left, but your internet connection just, you're on public Wi-Fi. You're at the coffee shop or something. Not right now because we're in the pandemic. But, these are the choices that you have to make. And so it's better to just set your target bid, know what you're willing to bid on a guy, and stick to your gut and place that target bid and turn on the auto bid. So after all that's said and done, we return the new bid credentials. And so we have a new high bidder, a new high bid, and new bidder ID, and we reset the clock and all the things. So that's ultimately how the flow works with bid validation. Now there is a little bit different stuff. Let's see if I can find it here somewhere in the code. I think it's auto bid. Yeah, so auto bid follows a lot of the same validation, and I want to show this to you as well. Let me flip back over how. And so we go through that bid eligibility every time that a bid is placed, but there's so many different ways that someone can place a bid. If you have customizations in your room, you've got a couple of other unique buttons you can use. Then you can use the green button here to click and spam, or like I showed you, you can turn on auto bid over here and bid that way. So for all of those things, it goes through that eligibility, the eligibility criteria that I just showed you. But if you're specifically using that auto bid, which is the last thing that I did there with the $41, it is when you toggle that on, we have to handle things a little bit differently, and it's kind of just double checking because instead of trying to place the bid outright, we are determining whether the bid you entered, like the target bid that you entered, is valid. So it's an extra layer because what AutoBid is going to do is going to place a +1 bid for you all the way up until the current bid equals or surpasses your target bid. And so I toggle this on, and now your browser is listening to the server, waiting on this bid to change. And if this bid changes, it's going to automatically click this button for you, is essentially what it's doing. But in the meantime, as soon as you try to toggle this on, we have to verify this number. Pause. Oh, I didn't pause it in time, I don't think. No, I did. Cool. So as soon as you try to toggle this on, the first thing we do is validate this bid. Because if I try to bid $108, actually that's not even good enough. If I try to bid $500, my max bid is only $186. So it's all well and good that eventually the bid attempt is going to fail because eventually it will get high enough up there. But wouldn't it be better, and this is another what if scenario, what if somebody tries to auto bid beyond what they're capable of bidding? So this is a question that I had to answer in building Drafty. If I try to bid $500, when I toggle this on, we go through a separate set of eligibility for this 500 bid. So you're going through double eligibility criteria when you try to use auto bid because it's going to validate this first and give you an error message saying that you need to fix this. And if that's fine, then it's going to start trying to place the bid. And if something goes wrong, it's going to alert you to that. So these different error messages are important because it's going to clue the user to know exactly what they need to fix in order to get back into the draft. Because this is happening so fast. You've got 30 seconds or 40 seconds, however long your timer is in your draft. It's not very long to figure something out and fix it before you get back into the draft, get back into the bidding war. So what we do when you try to place an auto bid is essentially the same thing. First thing we do is we check the value of that entered bid. And if there's nothing there, we tell them, hey, you got to enter a target bid. Like that's kind of the whole point. You don't just auto bid into infinity. No, you gotta define what your max bid is, and let it go. So that's the first thing. If that's true, so if that bid exists, now we can validate the number that's in there. So here again, the first thing we do is we grab all of the bid attempt parameters. So we have the team name, the roster, the budget, the max bid. We calculate the max bid. So again, we just put all that together because we're about to check everything else against it. And now we have, okay, if the bid amount is greater, it's the same stuff as before. If the bid amount is greater than the max bid, we tell them that their target bid exceeds their available budget. So again, it's the same error as if you just hit the green button, but this time it's directing you to that target bid box, not just telling you that you can't bid anymore because the current bid exceeds your max bid. That's the wrong error message. So this is really important from a user experience perspective to make sure we're delivering the correct error message to the user not just regurgitating that same error message over and over. It's kind of like when you try to log in on a website and it says your login credentials are wrong. It's like, okay, well, I haven't been here in 6 months, so I don't even remember what my username is. I don't remember what my password is. Wouldn't it be helpful if a website actually told you your password is wrong, or we don't recognize your username? Like, those two specific error messages would be so much more helpful than just a generic error message that says your login failed. Now you don't know what you need to fix. Is it the password? Did you typo the password? Or is it the username? Because you can't remember what it is. So you end up having to reset your password or reset your username, which is a big hassle. And that's a rant that I have. But anyway, so we want to be as specific as possible with our error message. That's all we're trying to say. So, okay, we've now determined that the bid amount is below their max bid. It's eligible in their max bid. And so then we grab, that's you can think of that, that's checking the team parameters. Like, okay, this bid is okay because your max bid is higher than what you're trying to bid. So that's fine. So now we ping the server like we did before. So we grab the existing bid parameters, and we want to check and make sure that the bid amount that they're attempting is less than the bid that we got from the server. If it's not, then we tell them, hey, the current bid is actually already higher than that number you entered in the box. Otherwise, we keep going. At this point, we call that other function where we check the bid eligibility. And so if the bid is eligible, this would go through, or the +1 bid, because that's what we're, remember we set the bid amount in the other function, where at the very beginning we determined, is the bid amount a forced bid, where we would just grab the number from the box, or is it a match bid, where we would match the current bid? That's the bid amount. But the default is to take the current bid and add 1 to it. So when we run that function, that's what we're attempting. So these auto bid validations, that's all we've had to do. And now we're good to go. We're good to proceed and make sure that that +1 bid is going to be valid for this person. And then we have another function here. What is this for? Oh, okay, yeah. So what's happening here? This doesn't really have anything to do with validation, except it has everything to do with validation. The way AutoBid works is, like I said, it listens to the server, so that if a new bid comes in, it can immediately try and place a new bid for you, because that's what the whole purpose of AutoBid is, to make sure that you continue to be the high bidder without having to click on anything, without having to pay any attention. So it's really, really helpful. So that's this. What this statement is doing is listening to the server, and when it senses that there's been a change to the current bid, it automatically checks the auto bid all over again. And so again, we check to see if the new bid exceeds the target bid. If it does, we turn things off. If the timer is less than or equal to 0, we turn it off, because the listener is also listening to the timer. So every time the timer ticks down, it's kind of comparing. And then every time, and then if the timer is still good, still time left on the clock, we check to see, is the current bidder, the current high bidder, still the team, my team. This is all happening on my computer. This is my attempt to place a bid. So my ID is compared against the high bidder ID. My team ID is compared against the high bidder ID. And if those are the same, then we don't do anything, because there's nothing that needs to be done. I'm still the high bidder, and that's the whole point. So otherwise, everything is successful, and we place the bid. So easy peasy, lemon squeezy, as my wife says. So it's a lot of fun. That is pretty much everything I was going to show you in this video. Just to recap, in Drafty, we have a lot going on. And let me get my brightness turned up or down. I don't really know. Everything's washed out. The sun went down, and it was my natural light up in front of me here. So I apologize for the bad video quality. But I'm reversed anyway. So, oh, there it goes. That's nice. So anyway, we talked about bid validation today, and I just wanted to show you all the crazy, the amount of code and the number of checks that go into every single bid that happens. Next time you're in a draft room and you see bids just coming in like crazy, remember all of the background work that's happening during that. It's going to kind of blow your mind. Be like, whoa, we were just at zero. 5 seconds later, we're at $40. 40 bids have come in, and all of that criteria has been checked every single time to make sure that those bids are valid. So it's really crazy, and it blew my mind, and it was also a real headache to get all that stuff in place. But hopefully we've done a good job, and hopefully you enjoy drafting on Drafty. So that's going to be it for today. Again, you can subscribe to these videos on YouTube, search for Drafty Sports, or click the link in the description down below to try a mock draft. Let me know in the comments what you would like me to talk about in the future. If there's something you're interested in from a business perspective, or technical coding perspective, or auction draft strategy, or player lists, I think is probably going to be the next video. The challenges I have faced compiling player lists and getting players populated in our database. Been major headache there. Can't wait to talk about it next time. So until then, I'm Daniel Fowler, your Drafty Sports entrepreneur, and this has been the Draft Business as Usual podcast. Thanks for joining.